All right, so this is going to be the midterm prep. My intent here is not to, obviously give you the test, but it is to kind of focus you on the more important aspects to make sure when you are studying that you study the right stuff. But more importantly, there's some fluff. There's some other things in the course that are put in there. Some of them are important, but the critical stuff is the stuff that I focus the test on. Just general information type stuff that you'll need, through the course of your life, contacting personal finance issues. So anyway, we'll jump right in. First off, in terms of the questions, though, there's going to be about 34, 37, just short of 40 questions. I've got the test in front of me. Actually, I lied, 41 questions. So anyway, multiple choice, true, false. No essay, none of that kind of stuff. It's too subjective. We'll be able to concentrate enough with multiple choice, true, false type questions. So I'm going to kind of not read the questions, but I'm going to kind of summarize the points and what's pertinent in the questions and the kind of things you need to know. So again, we've talked about inflation a number of times, in the course, and we have an idea of what inflation is. You all in your generation, at least thus far, you haven't really had problems with inflation, but in previous years, back before, the economy I didn't quite see, but was almost there, they had killer inflation, double-digit inflation. Now, inflation does not, destroy the money itself. I mean, $100 is still $100, but what can you buy with that $100? Well, if it's double-digit inflation, 10% inflation, you can only buy $90 worth of stuff with it the next year. So anyway, inflation and the buying power of money is what you need to remember. It greatly affects it. And when you're looking at a potential interest rate, you always have to, be cognizant of what the interest rate is and then, deduct that from any potential yield. Or if you're getting nearly zero interest rate with some of these savings plans, you're not really treading water. You're losing a bet. So keep that in mind. Higher prices sometimes, what causes that? We're talking sort of macroeconomic factors here, but supply and demand largely. What happens is, let's say interest rates go down. What's going to happen? Like in the housing market, well, again, all you've really seen pretty much are low interest rates, and that's going to encourage a lot of people to come in the market or stay out of the market, depending on where they go. Right now, since they're quite low, it's not a huge factor, but it can be if interest rates get high. Again, back in those double digits rates, a lot of people simply can't afford to be in the housing market. They have to rent. They just can't afford to get a mortgage. So if you're trying to sell a house in that sort of market, you're not going to be able to get, probably the price you want because there's not as many folks in the market. So anyway, interest rates affect the supply and demand of customers. So again, high interest rates would probably drive the prices lower. There's not very many people looking to buy homes. And low interest rates, you should have the maximum number of people in the market and be able to get a better price just due to the greater volume. Okay, so yeah, we hit supply and demand a couple times now. Also, a term too that you're likely to hear and is important. It's actually more important than it should be. Is the Fed. The Fed is, they do have a significant role in setting interest rates, and they also been pumping the stock market, so they have a significant role in where the market is today. But anyway, the Fed, when somebody says that, when they talk about the Fed rate, the Fed this, what they're talking about is the Federal Reserve System. So these aren't necessarily, well, they aren't elected folks, they're appointed, but anyway, they do wield quite a bit of power. And anyway, just important to know what the Fed is saying. If the Fed says interest rates are going to go up, you can expect the stock market to go the other direction. If the Fed keeps interest rates low, you're probably going to have a pretty good run at the stock market. But again, there's limits. But that's not what we're testing right now. We're just testing, making sure you know what the Fed is. Other things to consider with investments, and we've talked about this a bit in real estate. Real estate not being a very liquid investment, which means, if you need cash tomorrow, if your money's tied up in real estate, you got a problem. Now, again, I'm not saying real estate's a bad investment, but it's just the factor is that you don't have that kind of mobility due to the liquidity. Now, the stock market's completely liquid. You can get that money and basically, sell it today, settle in like 3 days, and you've got your cash. But at the price you want, no, not necessarily. So, very liquid is just having cash. Just having something in your checking account. But again, hoarding cash in your checking account is not good for the long term. So anyway, it's a combination of everything. Long-term investment, you don't necessarily need that liquid, but you probably do need some short-term funds or access to short-term funds. We've talked about opportunity cost. What is opportunity cost? When you do something, when you have a $6 coffee every day, $180 at the end of the month, you don't have to save. So again, do you need to go without coffee? No. But do you need to maybe think about that or calculate it in or whatever? You just need to, if you spend money on one thing, it's less money for another thing. And it also gets to the notion of paying yourself first. If you set aside a portion of your savings on payday, like say 10%, then spend it will, because it's all your money. You've taken care of your savings. So anyway, opportunity cost. We talked a little bit, the part about the resume section and all that stuff, job search, that's kind of tough to test on, and there's not a lot of meat in there, but obviously technology does have a role in what careers are going to be emerging. So that's something. One thing we did talk to about employee benefits was cafeteria style plans. If you remember, back in the old days, again before my time, I keep trying to pretend like I'm young, but anyway, they you would go to work for whatever company, and they would say, okay, here's your plan. This is what you got. This is our retirement. One size fits all. Now you come in the door, like literally come in the door, and your first HR meeting, you've got to select, what health care you want, medical savings account, this, that, and it's a lot of decisions. And these decisions, usually you make selections, within a few days, and then once those selections, after about a month, become binding. So you got to go into those things pretty educated to be able to do, make those informed decisions. But anyway, that's a cafeteria style plan, as in, you choose bits and pieces and put together your own plan. But the onus is on you to do it smartly, because especially some of the retirement type setups, once you're in one particular plan, you're stuck. So do some research on that. We will talk about tax-exempt benefits versus tax-deferred. So tax-exempt, wow, great. Tax-exempt means no taxes paid on it. Tax-deferred, like a 401k or something like that, what's happening there is you're not being taxed on it now, but you will be taxed on it later. It's deferred. It's deferred to a point in time later. The theory being that later you won't be, in your prime income earning years and have this, hopefully massive income that's going to, potentially open you up to lots of taxes. You'll be retired. Your only income will be your investments. And so, so be it. Tax me on them now, because hopefully it's going to be less. But that's, so a tax-exempt benefit, obviously great. Tax-deferred, that's a combination. But tax-deferred does mean the tax will be paid later. We talked a little about aptitudes, again, back in sort of job selection. You're good at math, you're good at this, you're good at that. Those are things that set you up for different careers. Not a huge amount there. We will talk about, let's say, an employer gives you some sort of benefit, and they give it to you in terms of they say, oh, it's a $1,000 benefit, so you can calculate the tax implications, because if the employer gives you that benefit, like, it's not so prevalent as much anymore. It used to be, where they gave you a company car. Well, that's a pretty huge perk, because it did increase your income, and for you to go out and pay the wear and tear and everything on a car, that's pretty pricey. So the amount of money that you would take, let's say it cost you $1,000 a month for a car. Well, if you're paying that in cash, that's all taxable wages that you're spending on that, and so it's a free car, if it's worth $1,000, is a huge deal, because you're not going to get taxed on that. Now, again, some of those things have changed now, and you have the IRS will characterize some of these perks as income, but if it's not characterized as income and it's something you get to use, that's jumbo. That's huge. So anyway, we talked about tax deferred benefits. Again, you're going to see some of this is not necessarily redundant, but it's going to we'll cover the different bits of material different ways. So tax exempt benefits, we talked about that. That is free and clear. That's nice. Again, a case where you get a non-taxable insurance benefit in this case. You're in a 28% tax bracket. How much would you need to earn to pay for that benefit with after-tax dollars? So again, it's going to be above the $500, because quite a bit above, because if you had to go out on the street and pay that, you'd be paying that with money that you've already paid income tax on. So again, those sort of benefits, if there's a lot of perks built into your job, those are very valuable. And say a $500 or $1,000 benefit, it is worth more than $500 or $1,000, since it's not being reflected in your income. Fixed versus variable expenses in lifestyle. What are typically fixed? We normally consider rent, mortgage fixed. Entertainment spending, generally a variable. So just different categories of stuff. We all know that if we want to put in broad categories, Americans are not traditionally strong spenders, and it's actually getting worse. More things about tax benefits, tax rates. We've talked about the marginal tax rates versus average tax rate. So a marginal tax rate is just what you pay. Let's say somebody says I'm a 28% marginal tax rate. That means that, let's say that marginal tax rate starts at $80,000. That means from $80,000 to $100,000, you're paying 28%. From that income below $80,000 to, let's say, $50,000, maybe that's a 25%. Again, these numbers change based on a lot of figures. The IRS code is not easily explained. It's certainly not in 2 minutes. But anyway, marginal tax rate means that tax rate that you're charged on that upper level of your income. So now average tax rate, if, let's say you're a 28% marginal tax rate guy, your average tax rate might be 20%, 18%, something like that. From $0 up to, let's say, 100,000, the average rate is going to be something lower. So, reductions in taxable income. Yeah, you have certain exclusions that are part of that. Again, know those terms when we talked about taxes. We talked about deductions and taxes. Usually, you're going to be itemizing to get the maximum benefit. There's a standard deduction, but if you itemize, if you're diligent about it, and you keep track of everything, keep your receipts, do all that kind of stuff, you'll generally be able to do much better by itemizing your deductions. You'll get to a certain point when you're doing your taxes and your standard deductions down here, and your itemized deductions should hopefully be up here. So you'll clearly want to take the itemize. Just means you have to file a more complex form, but get used to it. You're going to be there as a college graduate. Your income's going to be such that you're going to be doing that. So anyway, yep. So tax credits, again, good thing. Tax credit or exempt on taxes, those are very positive. A credit is a one-for-one deduction. Tax deductible, that factors in your tax rate. So, if you're in let's say a 20% tax rate, and you give $1,000 worth of stuff, it's tax deductible. How much do you actually save? $200. So, anyway, capital gains. Capital gains are, you buy it for X, you sell it for Y. Hopefully that's more. So that difference between X and Y, that's the capital gain. And you pay taxes on that money. Again, with housing, there's some special situations with capital gains, and we'll actually talk about that more in the second test, but it makes good sense, good financial sense to hold a house to make sure that you can escape the capital gains tax. But again, this gets back to this whole thing with Warren Buffett making these statements about his secretary is taxed more than he is, because his secretary is paid income, and she's paying a certain rate based upon her income, and he's taxed on capital gains since he's primarily an investor, and usually the capital gains rate is lower. Why? Because they want people to invest. I mean, it's a two-edged sword. If you want the economy to grow, if you want people to not sit on their money, you need to incentivize it. So generally capital gains are taxed less. It's political. Higher returns on savings, yeah, sometimes that will be less liquidity. Like those CDs we were talking about, you go out to 5 years. The rates these days are kind of laughable even on those. But if you're willing to tie up your money for longer, you're going to give up liquidity, obviously, and hopefully, though, you get a higher rate. Again, when we're talking opportunity cost, if you've got some sort of checking account that requires a minimum balance, yeah, that is an opportunity cost. Say it's a $500 minimum balance. That's money that you don't have at your disposal if you want to earn that interest. Again, we talked about interest rates and tax rates, and this is, in this realm, we're talking about comparing tax-exempt bonds, like municipal bonds are often tax-exempt, versus a standard investment that's fully taxed. So you need to be able to quickly do the calculation, because it's not automatic. It's not, I always want the tax-exempt one, because, again, these things are offered in a competitive market, and so the tax-exempt bond is going to have a lower yield than a fully taxed investment. So you need to subtract out your tax rate. Let's say it's 28%. You're going to do the multiplication, and in this case 28% tax rate. Let's say you're going to multiply it by 0.72, which is that remainder, and so your 6% tax or 6% yield after taxes is, you're going to multiply that by 0.72. It's going to give you something like, let's say 4%. Again, do the math. And now you're going to compare that to the municipal bond that's, let's say, at 3.5%. Okay, so this 6% thing, even after taxes, you're still money ahead. It's not always going to be the case. I'm just saying, you just have to do the calculation. You can't just go, it's tax-free, it's going to be better. No, you have to do a little bit of math. Open-end versus closed-end credit, we talked about that. Closed-end is car loans, houses, things that have a definite start, stop point. You got 30 years of payments or whatever. A credit card is open-end credit. It can flow in and out. Lines of credit are very similar to that. So it's more like how the way a credit card works. Debit cards, again, each to his own. I'm not a big fan of them, but just remember that a debit card is exactly like writing a check on that account. It's not even quicker since it's going to come out of there electronically. Most checks now are processed electronically, so that may be a tie. But anyway, you realize that. We talked a little bit about co-signing loans. Obviously, lots of pitfalls there. Not a big fan. If you do it, just be aware that you're on the hook for that loan. Arguably, they could say, oh, you've got the same liability as the person who actually is the signer of the loan. I would argue it's actually worse, because if I'm the bill collector, I'm not going after the guy who needed a cosigner. I'm going after the guy who did the cosigning, because he's obviously got the money. So think about that before you do it. And anyway, depends on the situation. Remember, anytime you're denied credit, what do? Look for a credit report, unless you know exactly what happened. But anyway, just the denial of credit in itself enables you to get a new credit report. And again, you can get a free credit report, a truly free credit report, once a year from every one of the bureaus. And in addition to that, if you're denied credit, get that. But if it just happens out of the blue, there may be some problem with your credit score. There may be some sort of early stages of some sort of, identity theft, perhaps. But anyway, it's just a good practice to get in there and review it. We talked about loans being basically secured or unsecured. A secured loan means that there's some sort of collateral behind it, like an auto loan is collateralized. They will come take that car from you if you don't pay. So they're more apt to give you the loan, and they're more apt to give you a better rate. So an unsecured loan, a signature loan, something like that, it's going to have a stiffer rate, and because they've got no security, no collateral other than your good word. We talked about credit cards. Very useful, but only if you use them smartly. And by using them smartly, you don't want to be paying interest on them, and in order to do that, you got to take the balance to zero. So again, if you don't, the credit card companies are more than happy to see you carry a balance. They want you to pay that minimum and pay them the maximum amount of money, and you want just the opposite. Yep. We talked about repossession with vehicles. Do they have to give you a call? Hey, obviously not. We've all watched Cops or Dog the Bounty Hunter or whatever. The beauty is that it makes interest rates on vehicles much lower, because they've got some collateral. They don't have to, trying to kick a tenant out of a house sometimes is pretty involved process. Taking your car, not so involved. Which form of bankruptcy? So remember, we talked about a couple different kinds. 7 and 13 are the ones you need to be aware of. 7 is, basically you give a list, and the court decides what you get to keep, and you are discharged from most of your debts. Any kind of money that's owed to the government, pretty much not going to be forgiven. But credit cards, things like that, it's going to stay on your credit record for quite a while. It's not a good thing to do, but and it's fairly drastic. I'm not going to do any dramatic statements. You write down what you have, and they decide what you get to keep. And then the other one, 13, that's the one where you're essentially going to pay it back. And, you've still got a job, and the judge says, you can't just, skate on all these debts. You are going to continue to work, and you're going to take care of this, make restitution. Small claims court, you never have a lawyer, so it's a way to keep court costs down. Service contracts, we'll talk more about this, but yeah, very rarely are they a good deal to the point where the consumer protection folks will often advise that they have too many exclusions and they're pretty expensive for what you get. So think hard before you opt into one of those. We did talk about arbitration and mediation. Again, mediation, maybe something you got to do to show good faith that you're concerned about resolving this thing. But at the end of the day, people just walk away from mediation if they don't agree. So, maybe in certain cases, having whatever, another figure in there to help you, resolve things. But arbitration's got some finality to it. Again, you'll hear binding arbitration, which kind of means that the person doesn't know what they're talking about, because by its very nature, arbitration is binding. Again, same sort of situation. You get in there, you present your side, they present their side, and then a decision is made. And you've agreed to arbitration. A lot of times you've already agreed to arbitration when you sign the initial contract for, say, like a cell phone. You can't take those people to small claims court because you gave up that right when you signed the contract, if you would have read the fine print. Anyway, we talked about a little bit about class action lawsuits. What are they? Class action lawsuits are, usually small stuff where, your little Prius, let's say, is potentially going to auto-accelerate, and so when you go to sell a Prius, people are thinking, hey, I'm going to give a little bit less for that Prius. So you, as the owner of the Prius, who've never had anything happen to you, you're kind of damaged here because your car's worth, let's say, $100 less on the resale market. So anyway, are you going to sue Toyota over this? Good luck. That's a lot of lawyers, a lot of stuff, you don't have the means. But some lawyer will get a whole bunch of people together, a class, everybody, all the Prius owners, says, okay, you've been damaged by Toyota in this case, and do you want to opt into this class, which means you're giving up your right to sue individually. Being part of that class, this lawyer takes a whole group of people, all the Prius owners who, returned the notices that were sent, and takes Toyota to court. If he wins, he makes bank. I mean, he makes some serious money. And you get, say your damage is, equated to be $100 per car, you might get 40, something like that. And the lawyer is gonna make the money. But, granted, he did all the work, he showed the initiative, but it's one way of doing it. Anyway, but the class, that group of people, obviously, you had something in common, and that was that problem. We talked about different housing setups, in terms of co-op type thing where all the property is, well, we'll talk more about that in class. On a condo, though, much more common. Condo, what happens there is you own everything from the paint inward of your little apartment. So you do own the place, but you don't own exterior walls. You don't own any of the landscaping type stuff, the parking areas, that kind of stuff. But it works. And then also we'll discuss earnest money and what the factor, what's the significance of earnest money. If you ever bought a house before, you'll be asked to put down an earnest money. And so it's not quite a down payment. What it is it's just money to show that you're serious. It goes into, in the case of real estate, it goes into an escrow account. And so if things do go south, you can usually get your earnest money back. But it is a show of good faith, that you're serious about this and you aren't just wasting everybody's time. Anyway, any other questions we'll discuss, but I think that gives you a pretty good head start on how to narrow your search and what sort of things you need to focus on. in terms of your study. Good luck on the test.